Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Israeli troops shot dead 3 Palestinians today, widening an offensive against fighters in response to renewed rocket salvos from Gaza after Israel's pullout from the territory. Israeli military action continued against Palestinian groups in spite of a U.S. call for restraint. Overnight, Israeli troops swept into the northern West Bank town of Jenin to arrest wanted men and killed one. Israeli army said its soldiers raided the nearby village of Burkin and shot dead 2 Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine fighters. Palestinian witnesses said the 2 were shot by troops while hiding in an olive tree. Soldiers arrested 12 suspected men in the Jenin, Nablus and Bethlehem areas of the West Bank.
With regard to the Israeli actions in Jenin, we, of course, condemn what the Israeli forces have done in Jenin in terms of the extrajudicial execution that took place. We condemn also all kinds of illegal activities and attacks against Palestinians everywhere. We call for immediate cessation of such acts and for going back to ceasefire, to a calm situation that would enable the 2 sides to resume contacts, resume discussions with the hope of going back to implement the roadmap and proceed forward.
In Baghdad's Adil neighborhood, U.S. forces raided the homes of 2 officials, arresting bodyguards and confiscating weapons. Adnan al-Dulaymi, Secretary General of the Conference for Iraq Peoples, said soldiers in tanks and heaves with 2 helicopters circling overhead broke into his home at 2:30 a.m., put him and his family in a guest room and searched the house. He said the Americans were acting on false tips that linked the men to the insurgency. The U.S. military said it had conducted several raids in those areas of Baghdad today, but could not immediately identify the homes or Iraqis involved. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, a spate of attacks occurred this morning. In Dora neighborhood, a bakery was the subject of an attack by unknown gunmen. Locals said 2 bakers were killed and a 3rd person injured in the attack. An eyewitness said the gunman first killed a boy and then stormed into the bakery, killing the bakers. According to local police in Baghdad's Habibiyah neighborhood, an improvised explosive device, which was apparently aimed at a U.S. military convoy, killed an Iraqi child. Algerians voted today on a peace plan the government says will help the country move on from a decade-long civil war, which has killed an estimated 120,000 people and left thousands unaccounted for, but which critics charge will whitewash past crimes. More than 18 million voters were called to polling stations in Algeria. Voters were asked simply whether they approved of the proposed Charter for Peace and National Reconciliation. The charter would end judicial proceedings, including those who lay down arms, those sought at home or abroad for allegedly supporting terrorism, and those convicted in absentia. The charter also provides repatriation for families whose loved ones disappeared. President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has told the charter as an opportunity to close the wounds from the deadly violence and atrocities that gripped Algeria for more than a decade after the insurgency erupted in 1992. Iran's parliament took a first step towards halting snap international inspections of its atomic facilities as the country vowed to resist Western pressure over its nuclear activities. MPs voted to give priority in parliament to a bill to halt inspections by the UN agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and an additional protocol to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran rejected as illegal and unacceptable the resolution which requires the immediate ratification of the additional protocol and total suspension of activities related to uranium enrichment. On Tuesday, Iran threatened to resume enrichment and to cease implementation of the additional protocol if the West does not modify the resolution. The protocol, signed but not ratified by Iran, gives the IAEA more inspection powers and is central to efforts to clear up suspicions Tehran is seeking the nuclear bomb.
أكثر من أسبوعين عاشت الجزائر عبر كامل ربوعها أجواء الترحيب.
For more than 2 weeks, Algerians have been celebrating the referendum on the National Peace and Reconciliation Initiative. They voiced their approval and welcomed the Algerian president's initiative, which calls for building a peaceful and developed nation.
People throughout Algeria welcomed the president's announcement on the referendum on the National Peace and Reconciliation Initiative, which comes in the framework of strengthening national unity for a safer and more secure Algeria. Algerians, young and old, and from all walks of life, took part in rallies and celebratory events to show solidarity with the president's initiative. They believe that this is a historic referendum and Algeria cannot proceed without it.
We are for the National Reconciliation Initiative.
We are very happy for our president. God give him more power and bless all believers.
Algerians are praying as they are getting ready to vote for the referendum on the Peace and Reconciliation Initiative on the 29th of September. The majority of people, whether or not directly affected by the Algerian crisis, will vote yes on the referendum. They are united under the flag of peace and reconciliation.
God bless the Peace and Reconciliation Initiative. Many Quranic verses and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad call for reconciliation. God says there is no good in people if they do not do good deeds, give charity, and reconcile with each other.
As Algerians get ready to vote on the referendum on the National Peace and Reconciliation Initiative, Algerian nationals in foreign countries are also taking part in the process.
We are for peace and reconciliation. We love Algeria and we will be okay. What do you say?
Yes, for the referendum.
We are returning to Algeria. We are flying freely. We are going back to our lovely country, the nation of Algeria. The Algerians are participating in the referendum on the National Peace and Reconciliation Initiative, which was presented by the Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. The National Peace and Reconciliation Initiative calls on Algerians to turn over the pages of the past and leave behind the period of violence that lasted for 10 years, leaving over 150,000 people killed.
As the referendum on the National Peace and Reconciliation Charter began, the Algerian streets are filled with conversations about the Charter, especially by the families of the missing and kidnapped, who generally believe that they must know the truth about their missing relatives.
My husband is missing. I must know the truth. I would like to know if he died. And if he died, where did they bury him? I do have news that he's still alive, and I hope that's true. And I'd like to know his whereabouts.
I want to know the truth about my son. It has been 9 years and I still don't know what they did to him.
The most important thing is to know the truth. Compensations are not enough.
Sheikh Jabalallah, the head of the National Reform Movement and one of the most prominent faces of Algerian opposition, says the following about the matter.
We are addressing the authorities, but we are not holding them responsible for all of the missing individuals. We did not say that. What we are saying is that the authorities are responsible for finding out what happened to all of those who are missing.
Sheikh Jabalallah also suggests the following as a way to solve the problem.
The file on those missing was and continues to be a huge, shameful mark on the face of the Algerian regime. This file, no doubt, must be dealt with in a just manner. I say that it must be dealt with in a just manner. In my opinion, a just solution must fulfill two conditions. The first condition is that the authorities must uncover the fate of those missing. And the second is that it must try to reconcile with the families of the missing to provide them with acceptable compensation.
أن تسترضيهم والاسترضاء هنا يكون بتعويض عادل. هذا ونشير إلى أن قيادات حركة العروش.
In addition, the leaders of the Arush movement called for a general protest in the Qabiliya district on the day of the referendum, without directly asking people to boycott or to not participate. This came after the Algerian president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, refused the request of making the Amazigh an official language of the country. This is Algeria, the wounded Algeria, the Algeria that is trying to heal its wounds and reunite its divided groups. Many files are difficult to solve, beginning with the files of those missing and ending with a problem facing the Qabiliya region.
In stepped-up attacks by insurgents in Iraq, at least 50 people were killed in a car bomb blast in central Iraq. 5 U.S. soldiers were also killed west of Baghdad. An Interior Ministry official said the car bomb went off almost simultaneously in the city of Beirut, 70 kilometers north of Baghdad. At least 70 other people were wounded in the blasts. The 5 American soldiers were killed when a roadside bomb blew up next to their vehicle near Ramadi, west of Baghdad. A statement from the U.S. military said the soldiers were assigned to the 2nd Marine Division. Earlier in the southern Iraqi city of Najaf, at least 60 people were killed and 8 wounded when a bomb exploded at the house of a bodyguard of Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. The blast shattered the relative calm enjoyed in Najaf and threatened to antagonize the fiery cleric's militiamen, who have largely refrained from violence since they fought U.S. troops in the sacred Shiite city last November. In Baghdad, a roadside bomb exploded as a U.S. military convoy was driving on the eastern side of the capital, setting one vehicle on fire. In another incident, the police chief of the northern oil-rich city of Kirkuk survived an assassination attempt after a bomb went off as the two-vehicle convoy of Colonel Burhan Taha al-Tayyib was driving south of Kirkuk city. Colonel Tayyib escaped the attack unscathed, but his driver was wounded. 29 people were reported killed in an unprecedented attack on a refugee camp in the northwest of the Sudan region of Darfur. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees said that according to initial reports, the Arrow Shadow camp was attacked by about 300 armed men on horses and camels. It said another 10 people were reported to have been seriously wounded, and the nearby village was also believed to have been attacked and burned. The camp, home to 5,000 people, lies in an area that has been regarded as a no-go zone for the UN for months because of continuing violence. The UN has already warned that it may have to suspend an operation in Darfur because of a resurgence in violence.
المتحدة أصدرت المحكمة العسكرية في فورت هود بولاية تكساس.
A military court in Fort Hood, Texas has sentenced U.S. Army Private Lindy England to 3 years in prison. England was at the center of a scandal in 2003 at the Abu Ghraib prison where she took part in Iraqi detainee abuse. The court also dismissed England from the army because she did not preserve its integrity. Iraqis expressed outrage and resentment towards England's light sentence, accusing the U.S. of having double standards. If the victims had been Americans, the sentence would have been much harsher and longer. One Iraqi citizen believes that the court ruling poses a new scandal for Washington. It is proof that the U.S. has a double standard policy. Another Iraqi citizen accused the U.S. administration of deception by prosecuting England in court in order to show the world that they are civilized defenders of human rights.
They arrested her for rape and torture and sentenced her to only 3 years. This is not a fair trial. She should be sentenced to life or death. Why was she not tried in Iraq?
She should have been tried in Iraqi courts. What is the meaning of persecuting her in the United States? Her sentence is a joke. Justice was not served. She must stand trial in Iraq in order to heal the wounds and restore the rights of those tortured by her.
Prime Minister Ariel Sharon today strongly denied reports that were sparked by his own political advisor that he was planning a unilateral Israeli withdrawal from parts of the West Bank and the annexation of other areas there. Addressing a business conference in Tel Aviv this morning, the Prime Minister said that since the story broke, ambassadors have been lining up outside his door asking if Israel has a secret agenda. The harshest reaction, said Sharon, came from the United States, which was surprised to hear that Israel was allegedly planning to modify the roadmap peace proposal. It was Eyal Arad, senior political advisor to Sharon, who unleashed the storm on Wednesday when he said that if peace talks with the Palestinians remain deadlocked over time, Israel might consider turning the disengagement into a strategy and would determine its borders independently. The idea of unilateral Israeli steps was also supported just yesterday by the chief of military intelligence, Aaron Ze'evi, but today Sharon insisted there's only one plan, and that is the roadmap. According to a report issued by the General Security Services, the Shabbat, to mark the 5th anniversary of the outbreak of the Intifada, Palestinian terror groups have upped their efforts to carry out terror attacks on Israeli targets, especially in Jerusalem. This despite the ceasefire called by the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Over the past year, 57 Israelis were killed in a total of 3,531 attacks in Israel and the territories. 262 of those attacks were perpetrated inside the Green Line, compared with 185 last year. Over the 5 years of the Intifada, a total of 1,061 Israelis were killed and some 6,000 wounded in over 26,000 attacks. The report said the terror groups will increase their efforts to carry out attacks in the West Bank, and efforts to transfer weapons, including Qassam rockets from Gaza, are already underway. Well, joining me now in the studio is Popsy Leibler, a social worker and member of the board of One Family, a volunteer group that has brought help and comfort to victims of the Intifada. Thank you so much, Popsy, for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Well, I've just read out a string of shocking statistics, but of course to you they're much more than statistics. You know these people very well, do you not?
Unfortunately, the staff and volunteers of the One Family Fund are intimately and closely connected to these terror victims. And I'd just like to pinpoint the statistics that you mentioned, that you listed a few minutes ago. There have been 124 children killed over the last 5 years, all of them 17 years and younger. And what the statistics that you mentioned also means is that 800 people were orphaned, out of which 29 people lost not one parent, but both parents. And to us at the One Family Fund, this means that we are in daily contact with these families. We are also in daily contact with the injured families. As you mentioned, close to 7,000 people were injured over the last 5 years.
As the Israeli escalations increase in Gaza, the Palestinians are commemorating the 5th year of the Al-Aqsa Intifada, despite the very heavy toll on the Palestinians. The Israeli siege continues to suffocate the Palestinians' daily lives, even after nearly 5,000 Palestinians were martyred, thousands of others were wounded, and hundreds of homes were demolished. In addition, the Palestinians have had to deal with the negative international consequences following the September 11th events. However, despite all these costs, the Palestinians never lost sight of their noble goal behind their Intifada, which is to live in dignity with a tangible Palestinian state.
Regardless of the achievements and setbacks, the Palestinian Intifada enters its 6th year through wide doors, leaving behind 5 years of bloodshed, during which the occupation forces planted death in every place in the Palestinian territories. More than 4,000 martyrs, 60,000 wounded, and 8,000 prisoners are the cost of this Intifada, as well as the destruction of everything in the Palestinian territories in the largest confrontation in the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict since 1967.
The greatest failure is the failure to create a united Palestinian leadership that is able to maintain the resistance and political struggle, and that can translate the sacrifices of the intifada into political gains.
The success of the modest Palestinian resistance in the face of the Israeli military machine caused the occupation forces to panic after the resistance killed nearly 1,500 Israelis, among them Rechavam Zaevi, the Minister of Tourism. These martyrdom operations caused the Israeli government, for the first time, to withdraw from Palestinian-occupied lands. The Israelis made different justifications for the withdrawal, but it was because of the Palestinian resistance victory over the Israeli war machine. This victory was met with other losses, including the Israeli apartheid wall, which, when the construction is completed, will annex more than 50% of the West Bank under the pretext of preventing Palestinian attacks against the Israelis.
عدنا لنطرح بقوة موضوع المستعمرات وبناء الجدار.
We offered to seriously discuss the issues of the settlements and the building of the wall. We asked the international community to give these issues a high priority, and there were significant developments concerning this issue in the Quartet Committee. First, we have to see what the tangible outcomes will be, if there will be any.
Many events took place in the past 5 years, most notably the death of the Palestinian President Yasser Arafat. Ambiguity still surrounds his death, which may, after all, be different only in the method used to assassinate other prominent Palestinian leaders. The founder of the Hamas movement, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, and the Secretary General of the Democratic Popular Front, Abu Ali Mustafa.
Israel and its officials in general, even the Prime Minister, did not hide their clear and announced desire to get rid of President Yasser Arafat in the last years of the Second Intifada. However, until now, there has been no material evidence to prove that Israel murdered Arafat.
ثمة دليل مادي يمكن الركون إليه حتى يقال أن إسرائيل هي التي دبرت موت عرفات. وبعيدا عن المآسي والجروح صفق الجميع.
Far from the tragedy and wounds, there was a hope of turning a new page in the Palestinian-Israeli relations with the election of Mahmoud Abbas as the successor of the President Yasser Arafat, who Israel said was an obstacle to peace. However, now Israel's true intention to derail the long-awaited peace have been revealed. In addition, the internal Palestinian situation is shaky because of the deteriorating security. There is no difference between today and 5 years ago. Israel has been controlling the Palestinian territories at the point of the gun for the past 5 years. Nevertheless, it failed to achieve its stated objective of crushing the Intifada within a few days. Majid Saeed, Abu Dhabi Television, Ramallah.
Lawmakers gave only a grudging blessing yesterday to membership talks with Turkey starting next week, and said Ankara must recognize a 1915 massacre of Armenians, a genocide, before it joins the bloc. They also criticized Turkey's human rights record and held up a vote to ratify an extended customs union with the 25-state European Union in a bid to pressure Ankara to open its port and airport to traffic from EU member Cyprus. EU ambassadors were scheduled to meet later throughout the day to try to end the dispute before the talks. The European Parliament's non-binding resolution on the Armenians was a political slap in the face of Turkey, which insists the killings were not genocide. Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan played down the moves, telling reporters the European Parliament's decision will not affect the EU process. It has no power of sanction. The EU legislature has no say over the start or conduct of the talks, but its assent was needed before Turkey can join, which is at least a decade away. While Austria remains tight-lipped, observers suggest Vienna was using the veiled threat of a veto on Turkey to push the EU to open talks with Croatia, delayed since March due to lack of progress in finding a key war crime suspect. Perhaps not coincidentally, the EU was expected to hold a new task force meeting to review the Croatia situation this weekend, amid suggestions that there have been more positive signs in recent months. EU foreign ministers would have to hold an emergency meeting on Sunday in Luxembourg, hours before negotiations are to start, unless their ambassadors clinch a deal earlier in Brussels. Diplomats said the opening ceremony could slip to Monday evening because Turkish Foreign Minister Abdullah Gül would not board a plane until the EU ministers have formally endorsed a framework for negotiations. British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw, whose country holds the revolving EU presidency, said it would be a huge betrayal of the hopes and expectations of the Turkish people and of Prime Minister Erdogan's program of reform if, at the crucial time, the EU turned its back on Turkey. The EU legislature demanded that Turkey recognize EU member Cyprus soon and said negotiations could be suspended unless it granted access to Cypriot aircraft and shipping by next year. Cyprus said if Turkey complied with EU, it would back Ankara's EU accession. Yesterday's vote by the parliament followed an emotional debate in which many deputies attacked Turkey's record on human rights, religious freedom and minorities, reflecting widespread public hostility to the poor, populous nation ever joining the bloc. EU Enlargement Commissioner Olli Rehn warned Turkey it would have to amend a new penal code adopted to meet EU criteria if hardline judges were still able to prosecute Turkey's leading novelist for expressing his views on the killings of Armenians under Ottoman rule. Opinion polls show a majority of EU citizens, especially in France, Germany and Austria, oppose Turkish membership. In art news, many young Lebanese have taken the uncertain path of making a career out of their passion for art. In the past couple of years, galleries, restaurants, pubs and even coffee shops have motivated art lovers to display their work across the capital. Salih Khouri, a young, ambitious newcomer in the country's art world, has displayed her work in various spots in Beirut. She is now holding her first gallery, dubbed Glamour Girl. This is Beirut, home to a booming art generation. Among it is Salih Khouri. These are Vanessa, Angelina, Este and Kaya, some of Sally's artwork. Together they make up the Glamour Girl exhibition displayed at Art Lounge, a modern art gallery hidden among highways in an industrial area of the capital. Sally usually draws women in their full form, but explained why for this exhibition she chose close-ups of their faces.
It shows more character, for each and every one has a different character. And I mixed the realistic with the abstract, so that her face was realistic and her hair is all abstract, so gave it like a different touch.
Despite some similarities between the artist and her paintings, Sally stressed none of them was a self-portrait.
They're not people I know. Let's say I take a picture and I'll change everything in it, so it won't look like the picture in the end. It'll look completely different, and I'll put whatever I want into the painting. Like I'll make her lips look bigger, I'll make her eyes look, and I'll give her the character I want her to portray. So depending on the way she looks, or the feel you get when you look at her.
Sally had a hard time choosing her favorite glamour girl, but settled with the central Angelina, inspired by actress Angelina Jolie. Asked about the situation for artists to exhibit and make a living from their work in Lebanon, Sally said she was content, but stressed a lot of hard work was needed. She said, in her view, the hardest challenge in the art business was recognition.
I'd have to say recognition, because it all depends on who you know, or who gets to know you. Because if you don't, if you don't exhibit your work, if you don't show your work, and if you don't put it out there, then no one's gonna know. I mean, you really have to go for it.
Many artists like Sally have innovated Beirut's art life, with many of their work displayed across the capital's nightlife and social hubs. Salih Khouri, Future Television, Beirut.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.